Explaining prescribed fire in the lower Appalachia Mountains. Fire has long been at home, and an important element in these eastern mountains, as long ago, many of its animals and vegetation adapted to low-intensity fires applied seasonally. In the hills and lowlands, the people of fire, the Cherokee once managed much of this landscape with prescribed fire. They had specialist groups responsible for different aspects of the natural world, some of whom used prescribed fire in their management duties. Fire in the Appalachia is strongly influenced by climate factors as well as by its historic vegetation, as well as exotic species introduced into this region through major recent periods of ecological devastation of the region from heavy resource extraction and resource manipulation efforts. Climate here is believed to exert a strong control on fire activity across the region in both its seasonal and interannual timescales. And within that, there are certain features that appear to affecting fire activity more. The first influence is based on regional humid temperate conditions that encourage the vegetation production here to generate high levels and rapidly accumulate fuel loadings. Throughout the year in the southeast United States, annual weather and leaf fall patterns also affect seasonal fire activity. Yet on longer multi-year seasonal cycles, sometimes wet patterns rotate in, which lead to extended periods of heavy fuel buildup and other drier times of drought, like that experienced in the recent fall when conditions become highly favorable for burning. During the dry times, lightning can create fires that take place during the tree's growth period that will cause much greater mortality than those occurring during the tree's dormant season. In the past, these natural fire conditions of a dry drought period and fire introduced by both man and lightning cause large-scale cyclic fire exposure across the region, but with mostly short-intensity fires that had healthy effects to the Appalachian forest ecosystems. Today, it would be impossible to safely replicate this fire environment on that historic scale due to the increased population settlement across this region. Fire has been an integral natural process in the oak and pine forests that have made up the Appalachian ecosystem for the last thousands of years. Studies of soil charcoal here have recorded that periodic fires have been a part of its cycles dating back at least 10,000 years. Other studies, surveying the fire scars back to the mid-1600s, have documented that forest fires have occurred periodically, sometimes as often as every 3 to 9 years, across the southern Appalachian region. This land has long been adapted to fire. Fires amongst these ancient mountains, historically introduced by lightning bolts on nature's own timeline, have more recently been ignited largely via human intervention across the region. This history of human-activated fires in the Appalachia dates back to Native American times. Fires were traditionally lit annually in areas across the Appalachians to assist in opening the forest understory, to make forest travel and foraging easier, to increase plant diversity, and improve food sources for wildlife. Early Europeans who followed the Native Americans here continued to use fire to adapt their environment in a similar fashion. Europeans lit fires to clear lands for agricultural purposes, keeping ridgetops open and exposed to sun to benefit livestock and game grazing, and to increase their wild berry foraging yields. Fire was also used by the Europeans to kill off pesky infestations of ticks and chiggers on newly settled lands, and to open up choked understory areas to their slightly different means of travel and hunting. This cyclic exposure to human-ignited fires across Appalachia has been significantly altered over the past 80 to 100 years, with more people pouring into the region after the turn of the 20th century. Our current perspective on wildfire protection has also transformed with this increased population to where fire is now being seen as a destructive force in the places where humans and the forest interfaces at the urban/rural fringe. State and federal agencies across the region have been aggressively assigned to extinguish fires in the Appalachia region, creating a drastic shift from cyclic fire exposure for forests onto zones of fire exclusion, which has greatly altered the forests of Appalachia. Open habitat, vegetation of the region long adapted to flames, like grasses, were overtaken by more shrubs and tree species not acclimatized to survive exposures to fire. The Appalachian forests became denser without fire as the forest canopies closed in and the numbers of trees per acre increased unnaturally without the occasional fires to thin them out. Until today, some species of pine and oaks are having trouble reproducing in these areas due to crowded situations. The idea of reintroducing periodic fires to the Appalachian forests with prescribed or controlled and monitored wildfire events, just as they had for thousands of years, benefits the region's oak and pine forests. Across the region, land managers are once again starting to reintroduce annual spring prescribed fires, treatments into selected locations. These controlled, cooler burning, swifter moving, ground fires consume leaf litter, downed limbs, and thin out overcrowded forest conditions to increase the amounts of sunlight available to reach a forest floor, which promotes seed germination. Fires here can act to weed out non-fire tolerant tree species such as red maple, tulip poplar, and white pine, as these species have thinner protective bark and have only begun to thrive in these forests since the absence of fire. Fire exposure for a forest in the region can also reduce its occurrences of disease and insect pest outbreaks. Long dormant native grasses and wildflowers are also known to return after some fire types of exposure. Foraging animals such as black bear, white-tailed deer, songbirds, turkey, migrating geese, and many other animals benefit from wildfires, as afterwards they move throughout those areas to feed on new growths of seeds of plants rejuvenated by fire exposures, such as acorns, blueberries, and other seeds returns. So why are we tasked as firefighters to extinguish forest fires in an environment that is naturally adaptive to fire and has been burning for thousands of years? Rapid increases in population of the Appalachian region have brought the development of increasingly urbanized communities set amongst this mountainous landscape, and these new growing populations reside alongside large coal mining and gas well operations. Fire exposure for these relative newcomers, as well as it does for non-fire tolerant species of vegetation, now greatly makes these ancient natural fire cycles in the Appalachians much more complex. The protection of man-made structures, communities, and economic resources are a main focus of fire agencies during severe drought years in the Appalachians. This complexity has been further intensified as a result of fire being withheld from many of these forest areas for the past 80 to 100 years. During this period, forest litter and overcrowding flourished on such scale as to make fires burn hotter and more intensely than historic Appalachian fires, when the flames were allowed here to periodically thin forests and reduce its accumulated fire danger. What we know for sure, with history as our teacher, is that the mountain ecology and weather will attempt to continuously work together to give the ecosystem of the Appalachia the fire it requires to regulate these oak and pine forests and heal the local unique vegetative system long adapted to thrive. Those of us who take part in the Appalachian fires have become a part of the long ongoing story of fire in the region. The pressure of increased population certainly adds complexity to this natural schedule, and those that live here always need to hold the awareness that fire has been deeply entrenched in the life of these mountains and is a far more powerful force than any of us who responded will be. We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.